building inspection. Good afternoon. Before I start, I want to see, what kind of audience we had. Who are the homeowners here? Okay, and then who are the design professional? Oh, okay. How about contractor? Okay, 1, 2, okay. Uh, First of all, welcome all of you to come to join our second, this outreach program for ABE, what we call Accessible Business Entrance. I know this program is very complicated, but we will try to help you out to resolve it. That's why I know you have lots of questions. Today we have, our staff, DBI staff, especially thank you, Tom Fisler, our Secretary of Access Appeal Board. He is helping us to, to answer some of your questions. And then we have the small business here, a representative. I don't know your name. Ria. Okay. Then also we have, planning department. Also come here because it's affecting the historical front facade or whatever, hopefully not touching it. Then also we have public work, our, best friend, to resolve all the ADA issue, Kevin, yeah. Okay, before I start, okay, we don't stop right here. We will have another class on April 13, next Friday, week from this Friday, and then we have another class, and then we will continue, and then we also will go to heavy outreach to walk around all the merchants, trying to all the merchants corridor. Last week we went to Sunset, and then on the Irwin Street and also Thruway Street. We will continue to reach out all the districts. One thing is, after the walk, I feel, our department, that's what I told this lady, we don't try to make money. We try to help the public, inform the public what we are trying to do. This program, the intent is, everybody hear anything about the drive-by lawsuit for the small business? What we trying to avoid, we start with some program from the front. This is only the front entrance only. We are not doing anything inside the property. Only the how to get into the property only for the, for the public. Then, for this program, after we walk, and then we listen. We always need to listen to the public. We have, even you are comply or not comply, you need to fill up the form. But we have the old ordinance charge about 91.75 cents or whatever. I talked to Supervisor Katie Tang. I say, it's not good for the public. We don't, our department maybe we waive that fee. Is that better, or you want me to keep the fee? Yeah. Okay. Then to help you out. Then also another news, nobody aware of, our department done lots of things for all the public. We reduce our permit fee for 10%. Do you realize that, anybody? You never hear any department reduce their fee. Don't care, he charged to the client. More you get the commission. But we reduce 10%. Last year we had 7%, this year 10%. Do you realize it? That's why you encourage you to get the permit done fast. Then Supervisor Katie Tang, listen to me, and then she will go to introduce a bill, revise the ordinance next April 3rd, next Tuesday. First of all, the time frame I feel is very tight. I want to extend it until January 2019. Everybody have any objection? No? Okay. I just want to listen. If somebody object to it, I call her, hey, don't do it. Then second thing is waive the fee for 91.75 cents. Okay. If anybody object to it, then I can revise it again. What we want you to comply is not what we want you to get penalty. because, all this program, I remember when I in charge 6 years ago, we have a big problem with the soft story. Everybody experience of the soft story. We have a huge mountain to fight, but now is the last stage on the tier 4. The tier 4 is a little bit related to the ADE program because there's a commercial involved. That's why we need to work together to resolve it, right? Then also is, all this, welcome everybody to come give your, I think you have lots of questions on how to fill up the form, how to do it. That's why we specially have a counter 8 downstairs, first floor. You can ask any question. In case you cannot find anyone, I have Jimmy here. He is from technical service. Get his phone number and then call him. Then we also have a special line. You can call in 415-558-6699. Remember those phone numbers. Jimmy's number is special, okay? Okay, 415-558-6699, okay? And also is, we will have somewhat, my staff will make some presentation and then go over all those. If not clear, you can still, email us or, go to our website to get more information. Another thing is I want to address, during the walk, the cars inspection for, you can go through, everyone want to say how much, you charge. Actually, there's a program by small business, ask her, then you can get a free cars inspection. And then there's certain loan you can go and then ask her. I don't know the detail, right? Virginia told me during the walk.
Yep, I can talk about that.
Yeah, okay. I'd like to give you the okay first, okay? Then bad news, you need to fill up the form and then start the program. But, and then also is we are recording all this with a YouTube. You can go back home and then listen. Maybe I say something wrong and then you say, Tom, you say something wrong. I want to pay the fee. Why you want to waive my fee? Then, I don't want to take much of the time, and then I will throw back to my staff to get the presentation going. And then, they will, keep on this kind of program because we are estimate roughly 15,000 property in, that will be involving 25,000 small business. But all these are estimate, we don't know. Then we will try to improve it to notify everybody, homeowner and also the tenant, the commercial tenant. Okay. Who is next? Okay, Tom. Yeah, Tom Fissler is our expert here.
Okay. Thank you for everybody coming. Thank you, Tom. Can I switch? Yeah, okay. I take this as on. Okay, good. So there were cards placed on your chairs for any questions. Please keep the questions to the end of the presentation, okay? My name's Tom Fessler. I'm a building inspector here at the Department of Building Inspection. I'm working on the accessible entry program. So the agenda is we're going to go over the background of where the accessible entry program came from, the program details and requirements, partnering with our other associated city agencies, planning, public works, and small business. And we'll have resources and contacts. Small business has a lot for, I know there's already questions people have had of how do I get in touch with a CASP inspector, which architects and engineer design professionals would like to do this type of work. We have lists for you. Okay, so the background. Ordinance 5116 requires property and business owners to make all primary entrances from the public way to their businesses accessible for people with disabilities. So what is a place of public accommodation? Generally, it's a business where the public will enter the building and obtain goods and services. So examples of that would be banks, daycare centers, health clubs, hotels, motels, offices, repair shops, restaurants and bars, nail salons, any retail space, grocery stores, laundromats, medical offices. Those would all be places of public accommodation. The responsibility of obtaining the accessible entry is placed on the property owner. Okay, this slide is trying to show that the path of travel to the accessible entry comes from, if you have a parking lot, would be from the parking and the path up to the primary entrance, or the path from a public transit stop to the primary entry. Now, we've had a few questions from people about what is a primary entry. Okay, if you had an office building, if you just have the one lobby door, the primary door where you go into the office, that's the primary entry door. It's not the entry door to the tenant space on the 10th floor or all the tenant spaces within the envelope of the building. Now, if you had a entry door from the public way that went to a place of public accommodation, say a bank branch or a sandwich shop on the first floor of an office building that had its own door that's coming in off the public way, off the sidewalk, that would be a primary entry. So you could have a building that has multiple primary entries. Another example would be, say, a shopping mall, where you have the primary entry going into the mall, and then you have all the retail spaces within the mall. It'd just be the primary entry that's coming from the parking and the path of travel to that entry into the mall. It wouldn't be the small little shop within the mall. Okay? But if you have an anchor store on the end, say the Macy's, and it's on the accessible path from the outside, all those entries into the Macy's would be considered primary entries. Okay, so that's, oh. Okay, so the program objectives are to create a greater access for goods and services for people with disability, and ensure that you have a safe and usable entrance, reduce the liability by eliminating barriers to access under state and federal laws, to try to get away from the drive-by lawsuits that is a driver of the ordinance, and to help property owners better comply with the existing construction-related accessibility requirements. So the program is definitely focused just at the primary entry door. That's all you have to address under this. If you do get, if you are required to get a design professional or a CAS inspector, it might be a good time for them to look at other elements beyond the primary entry door. I don't want to confuse people saying that you have to do that, but it'd be a good idea if you had somebody with that expertise and you're paying them to go and look at the bathroom and look at other areas within the tenant space. But again, it's only the entry door that you need to, the primary entry, you need to address under this ordinance. Okay, We're partnering with the other agencies and roles in the process. The building department is the program administrator. We issue the permit, we conduct plan review, and we do site inspection and enforce compliance. Historic preservation is handled by the SF Planning Department. Any alterations to the public way that would be required is through Public Works. Reviews of technical infeasibility and unreasonable hardship requests are handled through the Access Appeals Commission. Resources for funding can be obtained through the Office of Small Business. And Mayor's Office on Disability is a good resource for disabled access laws and architectural standards. Okay, the role of the Department of Building Inspection, we're the program administrator. We perform the plan review, the inspection, and the final compliance. At the end of the day, at the very end, you will receive a certificate of final completion, much like we have with the soft story program, where you have a document that explicitly shows that you have complied. Okay, so steps of compliance. Step one would be to determine if the building is subject to the program by visiting the SFDBI. If exempt, you need to complete the screening form. Step two, if the building's not exempt, to consult a CAS inspector, a licensed design professional, and survey the primary entrance. Step three would be complete and submit DBI's category compliance checklist. And step four would be the file for a building application. And step five would be to perform the work and get the certificate of final completion. Buildings that are exempt. At new buildings that were built, were filed to be built after January 1, 2002, do not need to be comply with this ordinance. Religious organizations are exempt. Bona fide private clubs are exempt. Facilities that are not places of public accommodation are exempt. So you can have a commercial space that the public doesn't go to. You have, say, a repair shop. They're doing body repair. They've got the office where you go in and you talk to somebody. That is a place of public accommodation. If they have another building that's a commercial building where they're actually performing the work and the public doesn't go there, that building is exempt. That would be an example of something like that. Okay, so the compliance categories and schedule. Okay, so category one, compliance. In compliance, no steps and no barriers. That type of building wouldn't be, it's not a new building. It's a building that is existing, was built prior to the 2002 cutoff, but either generally because they've done major renovations to it, the entry, the path of travel has been upgraded over time and it complies. So you wouldn't need to get a building permit and it would be a building in compliance. Category two has no steps but minor barriers. So there might be some hardware issues, some ways to make the building compliant, but you'd still have to do the checklist, file for a building permit to show how you're going to comply, and then obtain the permits and finish the work. And then category three would be a building with one step. Category four, more than one step. And you can see the dates for compliance extend further and further out, depending on how non-compliant the entry is to begin with. Okay, and here's a category 1. This is a building entrance that has no steps. It's compliant with the requirements of the ordinance. So that would be basically classic office building downtown. They've had many tenant improvements throughout. They've upgraded the front entry. They have accessible primary door that goes to the lobby. Okay, but again, all the tenant space is inside, all the offices inside. Those are not considered primary entries. It's just this front door. But the door next to it that is, I don't know what it's a digital, it could be a digital garage. Okay, it's like some type of retail space. That would be a primary entry. Okay. Category 2, building entrance that has no steps, but there are barriers such as non-compliant hardware, lack of maneuvering space. You don't have the pole side clearance. The slope at the landing is exceeding 2%. That would be example of category 2. Category 3 would be a building entrance with 1 step. And then category 4, building entrance with more than 1 step. And potential other barriers of entry where you have the non-compliant stair, run, handrails, that sort of thing. Okay, technical infeasibilities and unreasonable hardships. In situations where removing barriers to the building proves to be infeasible or unreasonable, the ordinance requires the owners provide an alternate method of goods and services to be provided to the public. So examples of that would be potentially home delivery, offering the services another location that is accessible, various ways potentially, because to try to make the entry fully accessible to a very small retail space with multiple steps is just not, it's not reasonable, and we would try to provide the good or service in an alternate method. If there's a structural technical infeasibility, that may be granted by DBI, but non-structural technical infeasibility are reviewed by the Access Appeals Commission, and unreasonable hardships may be approved by DBI, but also have to be reviewed and approved by the Access Appeals Commission. Now I'd like to pass it over to Michele Langley.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Tom. My name is Michele Langley, and I am a senior preservation planner with the planning department, and some of you may know me from the counter downstairs. And I'm here today to outline the planning department's role in the ABE program. So though planning doesn't review plans for ADA compliance, we do play an important role early on in the design process to identify any potential historic features that we would like to have retained when rehabilitating any existing storefronts to meet these accessibility requirements. Alrighty. So our main tool is the accessibility checklist, and it's a tool, it's a voluntary tool meant to be something for the property owner, tenant, or design professional to seek accessibility guidance prior to submitting a permit application to modify an existing commercial storefront. It also serves as a means to document the process. After consulting with a certified access specialist, the checklist should be completed and reviewed with a planner down at the pick counter as soon as the accessibility work is known to be a part of the project scope. If the building is more than 50 years old, a preservation planner should review the completed checklist and any documentation you can provide us. So this is an example of some documentation that helps inform our guidance for you, along with a completed checklist and a CAS report if you have it. It's helpful to bring any photos, drawings, or notes documenting existing conditions of your storefront and sidewalk. And again, any documentation provided will help inform the planner's decision-making process. So quickly go over filling out the checklist here. And this checklist is available on the planning department's website, and I did leave a few copies over on the table. But essentially the checklist first asks you to identify if any of the following 4 features of your storefront are included in the scope of work. The first one would be entrances. The second, power door operators. 3, level changes and sidewalks. And 4, storefront system or other building features. We essentially ask you to note if any architectural storefront features such as the vestibule, bulkhead, or transom windows are being proposed for alteration. The planning department staff will make preliminary recommendations and may suggest project modifications. Sometimes the solution is readily achievable when it comes to historic storefronts. Typically, the most cost-effective solution is the addition of a power assist door operator button to non-historic fabric at the storefront entrance. If at all possible, it's very important that the door entrances should not be modified as to retain their original location, rhythm, and storefront configuration. If modifications are required, alterations should be implemented that minimize the loss of historic material. It is important to note that buildings built prior to the passing of ADA are not exempt from compliance. Some properties may qualify for use of the California Historical Building Code and may be able to demonstrate other acceptable means to meeting accessibility requirements. So these are 2 important things to note. There are no exemptions for buildings older than 50 years old, and some properties may be eligible for the California Historic Building Code. And with initial consultation with us at the pick counter, we can help identify some of these issues. And quickly to recap, the checklist was developed by the department as an effort to identify any issues upfront. These approvals initially or ultimately should be able to be done over the counter with a preservation planner. And I know there were some concerns about staffing initially. We have our general preservation hours along with general planner hours. And I will be available at the counter outside of preservation hours to answer any questions and to go through the checklist with you. So hopefully that can alleviate some of those concerns. And some complex projects may require intake. And projects that are subject to Article 1011 may still need entitlement, which is the minor permit to alter or their certificate of appropriateness. But one thing I wanted to mention is that the planning department is working on planning code amendments to Article 10 and 11 to allow for accessibility upgrades to be approved over the counter without an entitlement. So that's something that will also help to speed up the process. And the goal for those amendment changes are to happen by June of this year. And then I will pass it on to Kevin Jensen from the Department of Public Works.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. Really appreciate the time it takes for everyone to get here and your time during your busy days to hear about the program. Public Works Disability Access Coordinator. I'm also an architect. And so get this thing to work here. Looks like this is the top button. No, it's the side. Okay. Here we go. So the first thing I need to import in doing this work, and we've done a number of these over the years, not under this program, but case by case as people have remodeled their buildings and so forth. And we've learned a few things over the years in doing that. One of the key things is that the designers need to have a good grasp of the Better Streets Plan in San Francisco and how that defines the various zones in the sidewalk, and that has a direct bearing on how we approach accessibility in the sidewalk and the public right-of-way in terms of cross slope and running slope and things like that, which I'll get into in more detail in future slides here. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, the most important thing we need is a survey, a good, clean survey that is accurate. It's drawn to a hundredth of a foot accuracy in decimal feet, and not less than a 5 feet to a inch scale, so we can read it. And that, if nothing else, at least a clean survey shows us what you have to work with, what's the existing conditions out there accurately, with slopes and cross slopes between each key spot elevation labeled, and I'll have some examples of that in the future slides. Other than that, some standard reference materials here. The public right-of-way guidelines, even though they're not adopted yet officially, guidance from the Department of Justice and the Federal Highway Administration and the Ninth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals is to look at PROAG as still the best guidance that we have for accessibility in the public right-of-way today in terms of meeting our obligations under either Title II or Title III of the ADA. Beyond that, we have the California and San Francisco building codes, predominantly Chapter 11B, and then San Francisco Public Works Code has all kinds of stuff in there. For example, cross slopes are limited to 1.67 inches per foot, 1/5 of an inch per foot in San Francisco Public Works Code, not 2%, although at the end of the day, and when we're trying to solve these out, if we go to 2% on some of these, it's okay at the end of the day. But we try to design in construction tolerance in so doing, right? So we design less than the maximum limits to where we can. And then the entrance, the definition of the entrance is a key thing. The entrance is not just the door, it's the level landing and it's the approach walk as well, and the hardware on the door. So when we say entrance, it's not just the landing and the door, it's the approach walk, which is the sidewalk in these cases typically. And we also have, if you have landscaping in front of your areas or want to do it as part of this work, we have guidance on that online, where it goes, and that's all baked into the Better Streets Plan as well. And standard plans and specs for curbs and sidewalk and so forth like that. So here's an illustration of the Better Streets Plan and how it defines zones along the sidewalk. Frontage zone, if it exists, it doesn't always, is up against the face of the building. Then the pedestrian throughway zone, which is then typically also our accessible route, part of the entrance, as we defined entrance as the approach walk and then into the door. Then the furnishing zone is typically where we have street trees and utility poles and so forth and bike racks and so on. And the extension, the edge zone is also parking meters and utilities and traffic signs and so forth. And then cross section, this is also right out of the Better Streets Plan. Just gets into definitions of these zones more detailed and also the range of widths. Typically, the throughway zone on most sidewalks in San Francisco wants to be not less than 6 feet under the Better Streets Plan. That's enough room for two people to comfortably get by each other. In some cases, 6 feet's not adequate. Market Street or the Embarcadero, a 6-foot throughway zone is not workable. So it is contextual. But at a bare minimum, even in narrow streets, it cannot be less than 4 feet to meet California accessibility standards for an accessible route. And then another key thing is special zones. So if you happen to have a commercial space that is opposite a bus stop, a passenger loading zone, a white curb, or an accessible parking space, a blue curb, we need to take special care with the cross slope in the sidewalk right behind the curb and into the space so that it's not excessive, right? We want to keep that accessible as well to the extent that we can. We can also manipulate curb heights. 6 inches is the standard curb height. We can live with typically as little as 4 inches and still not upset our hydraulic engineers. Water will stay flowing in the street and not up into the property. And in most cases, we can go up to 7 inches or in some cases even higher if it's a red curb or if it's at a catch basin inlet, we've gone 8, 9 inches, in some cases more. That gets to be more contextual as well. And then driveways, of course, have special considerations, but we do need to get a path of travel across the driveway area while still also honoring the fact that cars have to get in and out of the property. So that's another particular issue that might be a boundary issue at some of these entrances as we're blending out the work from one side to the other of the entrance. And utility vaults, I've got some examples of that coming up. And this is one. So this is a typical sort of a storefront project, double doors in this case, and there's a large utility box that's hatched. And so that utility box then, in this case, defines the furnishing zone and the curb zone itself because of its width, and it's thrown over to the side behind the curb, so it provides the accessible route along the accessible throughway zone for pedestrians. And then the building zone is used, in this case, for an encroaching ramp that's coming out perpendicular from the entrance. And this is utilizing the a long-standing DBI informational bulletin that allows power door operator in lieu of level landing and also in lieu of strike side clearance. And it's been my experience that those two bulletins are used in these sort of situations quite often. So what we get then is a level landing out in the sidewalk in the pedestrian throughway zone, not right at the door. But this area here is the level landing, not here. So with the power operator, one can then roll up through the ramp and into the space because the doors are standing open already. This is a plan of that actual project illustrating this. You can look at this online. It's far too detailed to go in for here, but you can see the large vault and other utilities that are out in the edge zone. So the cross slopes in the furnishing zone and the curb zone are over 2%. Through here, they're 2% or less through this whole zone. Along the sidewalk here, our accessible route, the pedestrian throughway zone. And this is a ramp zone. This area here, the building zone is warped.
Stay on the mic, please.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry. And then some sample cross sections that illustrate how those zones have different cross slopes as well. And this is a photo of the finished work. So the idea is a smooth, gentle, compliant path of travel down the center of the sidewalk, a level landing opposite the entrance, and then a path from there up into the door and through the door. And the areas that are over 2% in the furnishing zone are sloped not more than they have to be. In this case, the curb was adjusted a little bit because that large vault cannot warp. It has to be a single plane. More complicated example, an older building with 3 storefronts. This was on a street with about a 10% slope. And so it's a series of these then. We have a series of landings opposite each of those 3 doors, connected with sloping sections of the pedestrian throughway zone that in this case widened to incorporate an electrical vault. So it shows that the width of the pedestrian throughway zone may be variable depending on what kind of elements that we encounter in a given location. And then a section longitudinally down the street that shows the relative elevations of each of those entrances. In this case, diverter planters were put out to protect pedestrians from the ramps that are protruding out from the doors. And then a cross section down below. And a photo of the built product showing the throughway zone up through the middle of the sidewalk, incorporating the vault, the edge zone with a higher cross slope down to the curb, and then the building zone with the entrance ramps, in this case bounded by the encroaching planters. There's another typical example. This is a coffee shop, single entrance throughway zone that was provided between the tree well and the building, a power operator bar, vertical power operator bar at the base of the ramp that goes up to the entrance door. This is a sample of a building that's built on the intersection of 2 streets that are over 20% slope, illustrating that even with those slopes, these principles can be applied and still provide level landings out into accessible pedestrian route along the sidewalk. albeit for anybody who's using a wheelchair, it must have to be a power chair for this. Not many manual wheelchair users are going to be going uphill on this. Downhill, yes, not so much uphill. And here's an example of two more extreme cases for category 3s and 4s where we can entertain, in some cases, going with sidewalks that differ from the slope of the street, such that in the example on the left, the pedestrian throughway zone is lower than the top of curb on the right to catch the doors that were over on the left side of the property line. In the example on the right, the sidewalk had to be raised so much that we had to do a split level and hide that between a couple of tree wells there with steps and railings, but those work. So we get accessible routes down the length of the sidewalk and accessible paths into the entrances. And then this is a more extreme case, a higher slope street, but we have the pedestrian throughway zone again down the middle that follows street grade. A planter on the left. In this case, on the photo down here, it's looking the opposite direction, so the planter's on your right. So you can see there's a curb zone between the planter and the curb. It's 2 feet wide, so the parking, people can get in and out of their cars. A planter was provided. In this case, it didn't have to be. The pedestrian throughway zone down the middle, and then an encroachment was allowed in this case for a protruding ramp and stair structure. And this is an example here of what we don't want to see that doesn't comply, perhaps done with best of intentions in the past. We have a level landing at the entrance, but in so doing, the path of travel down the sidewalk was ruined, which is contrary to accessibility requirements. The first rule of doing accessibility and remodelings is you cannot reduce access to worse than it is today. This was done, in this case, in the name of accessibility, it ruined the accessibility on the sidewalk. The proper way to do this one is, as we had examples of earlier, a ramp down from the door with a power operator, and then we could have provided then a path of travel along this site. So this building would be a category 2 building, not a category 1, because the entrance, which includes the path of travel through the sidewalk, does not comply. This would have to be redone under this program under category 2. Okay, so I'll turn it over.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to my colleagues for very informative presentations. My name is Ria Aguinaldo. I'm the Assistant Project Manager at the Office of Small Business. I will be very brief in my 2 slides here so we can jump into the question and answer portion. So just a quick background, our office, the Office of Small Business, is the primary location in City Hall to start and grow a business. So we have our counter. I help staff our business assistance counter. So if you are interested in starting a business, or if you have an existing business looking for resources, come visit us at room 110. So what I wanted to spend my time on here is just to sort of take a step back and talk about just an overview of what this ordinance is intended to do and how these departments are working together to help ensure that we could sort of meet those program objectives that Tom mentioned earlier in the presentation. So the first bullet point here, the city is taking a bold step forward to ensure that property owners better comply with existing federal and state accessibility laws. It's really important to know that the Accessible Business Entrance Program, this ordinance overlays with existing federal, the federal Americans with Disabilities Act, Title III, that pertains to public accommodations, and also state construction related and also civil rights laws. So essentially what this ordinance does is sort of reinforces those existing laws and helps to ensure that San Francisco is in compliance. Right. Also, what I'll mention, we've heard from the different departments on the different roles. It's also important to note that San Francisco, because our city is very unique in our topography with many hills, steep streets, narrow and sloping sidewalks, essentially the build environment of our city has made it very difficult to make entryways accessible. So what you see out in the city are steps to entryways that are not compliant with federal and state disability access, and sort of to dispel a myth, Although our city is built this way, buildings are not necessarily exempt from having to comply with these federal and state laws. In addition, as Director Hui mentioned, we have seen a rise in drive-by lawsuits to businesses that have visual access barriers. At our office, we have businesses that come up to us with a letter from a drive-by litigant saying that they were unable to access services at that business. While, of course, there are valid and these are existing issues, we really wanted to sort of make sure that that's a point that this ordinance is looking to address as well. So with that being said, our office does have resources and assistance for business owners, property owners to help understand the overlay between this ordinance and other accessibility and ADA laws. If you go to our website, fsosb.org, under programs, there's a whole host of ADA resources there, including a list of certified access specialists serving San Francisco. Now that's been a big question that has come up. Where can I find a CASP inspector to work with? We also have handouts on what the different state and federal laws that are involved in access, and also our subsidized CASP program, which Director Hui mentioned, that helps provide businesses, specifically for tenants or small businesses, in helping to bring a certified access specialist to survey the business and provide a report on how compliant that business is with access laws. All right. Now, what I will just spend the last another minute on is some tips on how to select a certified access specialist or licensed design professional. As we know, if your building is not exempt and you do have to go through those 5 steps to compliance, the second step is to consult with a certified access specialist or a design professional to survey your primary entrance. It's really important to note, as you're shopping around looking for a design professional or a CASP to work with, that it's very crucial that this person is familiar with our unique building code, that has experience in working with historic preservation, that understands the nuances of the sidewalk modifications, and really has worked here in the city. So just a couple of points here. Obviously, price, location, availability, making sure that they are willing and able to sign off and survey your entryway and complete the checklist. Important consideration should be given. I'd want to put an asterisk on this fourth bullet point down. Given for accessibility experience and in dealing with access lawsuits, this ordinance, since it does have the overlay of accessibility and also building code, finding a professional that has worked with accessibility before and really understands the sort of legal implications of all of the different access laws that are triggered is a quick question to sort of ask them. And then, as I mentioned, we do have a database of certified access specialists serving San Francisco at that link provided here. Here are other resources as well. The American Institute of Architects here in San Francisco, the AIASF.org. If you go to their homepage, they do have a search feature where you can pull up a list of local architects to reach out to. The California Certified Access Specialists resource, their Division of State Architects has a list of CASP inspectors across the state. Our database has actually taken the state's list and filtered it to show those that are available for inspections in San Francisco and have specified San Francisco as a service area that they work in. And I do just want to spend one quick moment on the difference between a certified access specialist and a design licensed architect or engineer. Certified access specialists, or CASPs, have been tested and certified by the state to assess accessibility. So it's a very rigorous process to actually get CASP certified. Many of these CASP inspectors are architects and engineers in their own right, but they have that added level of accessibility that they can provide that guidance on those specific aspects. And a few other downloadable and searchable accessibility regulations listed there. All right, so what we'll go ahead and do now is I'll ask the panelists to come and bring your chairs up quickly. We have about 6 minutes to get through 10 quick questions.
Okay. Commissioner of the Access Appeals Commission, Commissioner Park would like to address quickly the meeting.
While you're getting set up, my name is Walter Park, and I'm president of the Access Commission. The Access Commission hears appeals from any decision by the building department that deals with accessibility. And hopefully we will never see you and you will never need to see us. But the last step is, the law is tailored to work as well as possible to reduce the drive-by lawsuits and to increase accessibility at the same time. We cannot write into that every one of the 1,000 different situations that occur in the 20,000 businesses. And so we have an appeals process. When you are done with everything else that you've seen up here today, we're there. There is a fee for filing an appeal, but we will.
Sorry, we can't see you online.
See me, you can't hear me. All right. I won't repeat that. There is a fee for filing an appeal, which we can waive for small businesses or people who have a financial problem. And we will be there to hear the last step in this whole process where there are problems that just need individual attention. We've been in business doing that for 25 years, and that's what we'll do. Thanks.
Okay. Oh,
Okay, so what we'll go ahead and do is we have questions here. I was informed that we have probably a little bit thicker of a stack. So the questions that don't get answered today, that are the sort of top questions, will be answered on DBI's website and posted shortly after the presentation. So I will just start pitching these questions. The first question here: what if it is impossible, physically impossible, to make an entrance accessible? We all have mics.
we don't all have mics. Well, okay. Well, that's a kind of open-ended question, but again, there is the appeals process. Okay, so the requirements to provide accessibility to a place of public accommodation. When the law was written, when the ADA was adopted, there is a view and a acknowledgement that potentially you can't make everything fully accessible. Okay, so that's where you have to apply for it, case-by-case basis, unreasonable hardship, technically infeasible. Then the department would make a decision. It would go to the Access Appeals Commission, and they would make a determination.
Great, thank you. So I'll combine a couple of questions here so that we could move this along. Is an office building that's not open to the public exempt from the ordinance? And if the office does not have tenants, it's currently vacant, does the property owner need to take action?
I would say that they would have to take action and submit a form with the department as to the primary entry to the building. Okay. Now, when you say that, how you have an office building that isn't a place of public accommodation, I don't see how you can have a large office building and not have some of the tenants in it a place of public accommodation. I understand that you could have somebody who's running a space that doesn't have any clients come to it And if they do meet with clients, they meet at Starbucks, then perhaps it wouldn't be a place of public accommodation, and you wouldn't need to apply to the comply with the accessible entry program.
Okay. All right, so following up on that, how can I tell which property this notice is referring to? I have multiple properties. I think they're referring to the mailer.
Well, if you have multiple properties, I mean, each property, each primary entrance to each property would need to register with the city through this accessible entry program.
Thank you. All right. I had one here that I wanted to ask. Okay. What happens if the existing sidewalk slopes more than 5%?
Well, it could slope more than 5% in two directions, cross slope and running slope. If it's more than 5% cross slope, then we would, using the examples I showed, expanding on the Better Streets plan zones, we can have some zones be non-compliant slope in order to get the pedestrian throughway zone to be compliant. You know, in the Public Works Code world, designed to not more than 1.67% was the first place we'd start. And then the width of that can also be manipulated in order to adjust the slopes of the other sections. We can also manipulate the curb height. So we can control cross slopes in that way. Running slopes are another matter, where we're blending on either side of a landing at a door. How much that can slope is judged relative to the native grade of the street that the sidewalk is on. Our goal is that the slope that a pedestrian is experiencing when they're going along the pedestrian throughway zone is no steeper than it need be relative to the street slope.
Okay, thank you. So this question's for Michele. Michele, are conditional use, or you'll have to inform us on what MPA is, to be required in addition to the alteration to commercial storefront accessibility checklist?
So currently, if your property is subject to Article 10 and 11, it would still require the entitlement along with the building permit. So that is the minor permit to alter the MPTA, or the certificate of appropriateness, which is for Article 10, local landmarks. And like I previously mentioned, we're working on the legislative changes, which would be a huge improvement for being able to approve some of these over the counter without that entitlement. So it would save a lot of time. And hopefully that's gonna happen this summer around June.
Okay. Now, are the following considered public accommodation? So we had a number of questions around what is an actual public accommodation. So this one is a professional office, so an architect's office or a nonprofit office.
Again, if you have clients who come to your office and you have meetings and you have a conference room, that is a place of public accommodation. Okay? So, realtor offices, architect offices, you have people coming to your place of business to get a good or service. At this, this point it would be a service, right, of designing something for your building, then it would be a place of public accommodation and it would fall under the program.
So may I ask a follow-up question? Nonprofits, other than religious establishments?
Yes. Okay, a nonprofit. If you have, okay, the question was, I'm sorry, I didn't answer the nonprofit half of that question. Again, if the nonprofit has people coming to their office and they're holding meetings with people, yes, and that is a place of public accommodation, and it would be would not be exempt. It's a place of public accommodation, and you would be part of the program.
Except that if it is a religious establishment, is that right? I mean,
Yeah, well, the religious part of it kind of comes from the ADA. The ADA, when it was passed, churches and religious were exempt. And, but in the California, in 11B, California did not exempt churches and places of worship. If you're going to do renovations at the church, it would be, you would have to follow 11B, okay? But at the federal level, okay? And again, we have to remember the reasoning behind the ordinance is really for the small neighborhood shops that haven't had many renovations done over the period of time, like the office buildings downtown, where generally all the entries would meet the ordinance. That's the real purpose of it. It's not to, that's the foundation from it. And all the other places of a public accommodation are being drawn into it.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, so we're going to have to wrap up now. We want to be conscious of your time. We're a few minutes over. But before we wrap up, I wanted to just mention we are doing this on an ongoing basis. We'll have all of the upcoming dates on Department of Building Inspection's website. So keep an eye on that. Office of Small Business is also doing specific business outreach to merchant corridors as well. So you can reach out to me for questions on tenants, but I do want to just quickly go through one by one. What's the best way to contact your office if you have questions?
Oh, well, you can look on the, we had it on up before, but we have a website, we have a phone number that's specifically devoted to this. Oh, there it is. So the website sfdbi.org/business entrance. You can come down to the department at 1660 Mission and go to the first floor, window 8. They have all the forms to fill out, and questions can be answered there. You can call and leave a message on the phone number 415-558-6128, or you can email DBI business entrance, one word, at sfgov.org.
Thank you.
As far as preservation issues, I am down at the counter most days, at least once a day, so you can feel free to visit me down there. But that is also my phone number listed here, so you can get a hold of me via phone or email. And the checklist is available at sfplanning.org under our permits and forms section.
And for Public Works, the information up there is accurate. Otherwise, the permit section for Public Works is our Bureau of Street Use and Mapping, which is at 1155 Market, 3rd floor. That phone number takes you there.
Great, thank you. So, and then lastly, Office of Small Business, we're in City Hall at 110. Thank you all for your time, and I guess we'll be here for a little bit for questions. Lastly, there is a copy of the presentation that will be posted on DBI's business entrance website, so bookmark that on your browser. And then the list of answers to all the questions asked will be on there as well. We will be uploading the presentation and the video for this, so you can also tune into that. Thank you.